I haven't been a big fan of MSR tents for years. While other companies have been innovating, MSR keeps putting out the same tents that lack livability and are heavy. But with the 2022 update and complete redesign to the MSR FreeLite tent, MSR might have a tent that can compete with popular semi-freestanding tents like the Big Agnes Tiger Wall and the Nemo Hornet. Let's start off with talking about what's good about the tent. First of all, the weight. MSR managed to cut half a pound off the 2022 update. It weighs just over 900 grams for the tent fly, the inner, and the tent poles. Add in some burly stakes like the MSR Groundhog stakes, and it still comes in at under a kilogram. The tent also packs up quite small. I like to pack up the inner and the fly separate from the tent poles, put the tent poles on the outside of my pack, and then the fly and inner still pack up to about the size of a soccer ball. Setup of the tent is pretty easy. It doesn't take me very long to set it up at all. It is a semi-freestanding tent, so what that means is that there's no poles going to the back corner. So you have to stake out the back corners in order to get a good pitch. It's also a double wall tent, so what that means is that you have a mesh inner, and then you have a solid fly that goes over top of that. As you can see, there is a cutout at the head of the tent similar to the Nemo Hornet, and I've heard a lot of speculation on whether this is going to cause issues with things like condensation and rain, but we're going to get into that a little bit later. There's some really good features with this tent, starting off with the zippers. There's two-way zippers for the door, so you can open up from the bottom or you can open up from the top if you want to get a little bit of ventilation up in there. And then the bottom zipper starts at this front corner, which makes opening up the tent really easy, much easier than tents that start with the zipper at the back corner close to the guy out point there. Once you have the door open, you can just tie it back really easily in a half open mode. Unfortunately, there's no grommets on the other side there, so you can't tie open the entire door, which is a little bit of a miss in my opinion from MSR. But then the other benefit with the zippers is that Garmin has gone with a double zipper system. So there's a zipper on the top here to open up that, and then another zipper on the bottom in order to fully open the door. And there's a couple benefits with this double zipper system. First of all, you can open it easily with one hand. And then the other benefit is durability. We'll talk about durability a little bit more later, but by not having any curves to the door, MSR said they've really increased durability with this system. For how well the tent does in weather, I've had it out in 30-kilometer-an-hour winds, and it did very well. I don't think it could go up much higher than that without putting out guy lines, but it has a lot of guy out points. You have corner guy outs here, head end, and then some at the foot end of the tent, as well as from the brow pole on either side. I've also had the tent out in some light snow and freezing rain. It had a decent load on top of it, and it held up pretty well. I've also had it out in rain. It has a DuraShield coating on it, which means that it just sheds rain really well. All the seams are taped, and when I had this out in a pretty big downpour, I didn't have any leakage coming into the tent. I also didn't have any splash coming into the tent. I was a little bit worried about the high fly on the tail end of the tent, that some of the rain that would splash off the ground would get inside the tent, but that wasn't a problem for me at all. You're probably wondering a little bit about condensation, but that's something we're going to get into at the end of the video. With durability, the tent uses DAC aluminum poles. DAC's known for making really good poles. It has a 15 denier ripstop nylon fly and then 15 denier ripstop nylon floor as well. And 15 denier is a really durable fabric. It's a good balance between weight and durability. All of the guy out points also have reinforced stitching, which is really nice. If you are having to guy the tent out in really heavy winds, then you know that those stitches aren't going to fail on you. Like I mentioned, there's also some durability improvements by the way they designed the door and having the two zippers. Like I said, I have here the two-person version of the tent. It also comes in a one-person and three-person. The two-person is 50 inches wide at the head and the foot, so it does have a square bathtub floor, which is really nice if you're using rectangular sleeping pads. And with that 50-inch wide floor to the tent, you can just barely fit in two wide 25-inch sleeping pads in there. It is a little bit tight, but does fit a lot better than a lot of other two-person tents. Most two-person tents, you can't even think about using two 25-inch pads in them. You have two vestibules for the tent with a total of 15 square feet of vestibule space. That's just enough to fit a pack inside of it. And then you have 39 inches of headroom, which is just enough for me to sit up inside the tent. There's not a ton of headroom, but we'll get into that right now as we start talking about what's bad about this tent. First up, the price. The tent costs $410 for the two-person version. Well, it's cheaper than the old model of the FreeLite and cheaper than some other freestanding tents out there. $410 is still quite expensive for the tent. You're unable to do a fly first pitch with this tent, so you have to set up the inner with the pole structure and then put the fly in over top of that. I've talked to MSR, and it'd be very easy to add a fly first pitch mode to this. All you have to do is add a grommet to the tail end of here so it could go into the pole. Almost all of the other issues have to do with the brow pole here. So first of all, the brow pole is separate from the main pole structure, which means it's a little bit easier to use than ones that are attached with a hub system. As well, the brow pole is quite short. It does not extend very far, and that leads to a whole bunch of issues with the tent. Because the brow pole is so short, you don't have a lot of overlap between the fly and the inner of the tent, so you can't leave the fly open if it's raining. If it's raining and the fly is open, you're gonna get rain coming straight down and right into the tent. The other issue with that has to do with how the door is designed. So as you're opening up the door, if there's water on it from rain, that water is gonna start dripping inside the tent on top of you and all the gear that you have inside of there. And this is an issue that I've experienced as well as some other reviewers. It's something I brought up to MSR, and it's kind of a pain in the butt. Because of that short brow pole, you also have very steep walls for the vestibule. And because of that, it's difficult to fit a really tall pack underneath the vestibule. When I put one of my taller packs inside of it, it ends up leaning against the mesh here, and that takes away interior space. And because of that short brow pole, you don't have as much headroom kind of in the middle of the tent as you would if you had a longer brow pole, and that can be a bit of a pain if there are two people inside the tent. And that's kind of the last negative of this tent. While it is a little bit roomier than some other two-person tents out there, it's still not super roomy, and if you are going to be spending a lot of time with somebody else inside the tent, you might want to go with the three-person version. Now let's talk about condensation with the tent as well as this cutout. It is a double wall tent, so that means if you do have condensation building up on the walls of the fly, you're gonna have that mesh protecting you from touching the outer walls. Like any tent, under the right conditions, you're gonna have condensation building up inside of the tent. Something that I noticed is that while I was in some very humid and moist environments and had condensation building up on the inside of the fly, I never had condensation building up on the inside of the wall of this cutout, which is something that was very interesting to me. I was kind of worried that because this was exposed to the sky and was gonna have a little bit of rain on it, that you'd have condensation building up on the inside. I never experienced any leaking on this cutout as well. The tent was very waterproof, never had any problems with that. Check out this video if you want to see me using the MSR FreeLite in some crazy conditions. I was bringing it out into the desert. It rained on me, it snowed on me, it was super windy, it sleeted. It was my first trip to the desert, so I was really surprised at the conditions that I was out in, but it was a very good test of the MSR FreeLite.